I've understood that we have a shared cultural background.
Yes, Victor, thank you. Thank you very much for coming here to my place.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for bringing all the equipment and taking the time to set it up.
Of course, my pleasure.
Yeah, so I was very excited when Wakun sent me your name, or I got the email from you rather. My background, my father's Croatian. He was born in a small town in Lika, Lica. I was born in Canada.
Okay.
My mother's German. She's born in East Germany, former East Germany. And I grew up in Western Canada, Calgary, where there's quite a large Croatian, there's quite a large Eastern European
Ukrainian,
yes, exactly.
Course,
so, and in Calgary, there's a Croatian Hall Society, and so never really learned the language yet. but I'm getting there. So, anyways, I was excited when I saw your name, and then we spoke on the phone, and you told me you're Serbian. So I here we are in the new world, retracing our roots through music.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
So maybe could you tell me a little bit about your parents? I mean, East Germany, Croatia. Where did they meet?
They met in England.
Okay.
Outside of London. My father was studying philosophy in Edinburgh.
Okay.
And my mother was studying Waldorf education just outside of London, England.
Okay.
And they met, and then they came to Calgary in 1976. My father got a job with the city of Calgary. Oil started happening. He bought a farm with some German investors. And then I was born in Calgary. My sister and I were both born there. And my parents, neither of them are musicians, but both of them, I guess it's the European background, and it's maybe the
music was present.
Well, the arts were very high, extremely valued.
Of course.
There was nothing more
important. That's the common European
food, good food.
Good
home cooked meals,
yes.
Homemade wine, and
did your parents make wine?
My uncle made wine.
Your uncle.
Yeah, and there was strong traditions. The barbecue lamb on a spit.
Yes.
A piglet for Christmas. Like
wonderful. Even in Calgary.
In Calgary. Yeah. And so I would say, and my father played accordion, not very well, but he would sing Croatian songs. I think that's the strongest memory that I will always carry from him. He's passed away 2 years ago, so he's no longer with us. But this project has been. He actually passed away 2 months before I recorded this album, and his presence has been very strong throughout the whole journey of creating this.
Of course.
I remember I went to Croatia for the first time with him. I was like 19, I think 18, 19. I went once when I was very young, but I don't remember really anything. And then we have a family farm that's still there, and a big oak tree that my grandfather planted, and so my grandfather came from Croatia to Timmins, Ontario, to work in a gold mine. So
was this before your father?
Yeah. No, so my father was my father was born in Canada. He's Croatian, but born So he's first. I'm second generation. He's first generation, but he grew up in a small village in Timmins, Schumacher. Basically, it was 80% Croatians, and they were all working in this gold mine. It's Northern Ontario. It's
close to Manitoba, or?
Yeah, Ontario, close to Manitoba. Sault Ste. Marie, Sudbury. Shania Twain is from Timmins.
Shania Twain is
from Schumacher is a small town.
I see.
Just
put it on the map.
Yeah, exactly. That's people are like, oh, okay, yeah, I know. Anyways, so he grew up there. So we have family there, and we have family in Prince George, Western Canada. and they were in Croatia. They were all farmers. It was generations and generations of farmers, and my grandfather came over in 36.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And he basically left he had very little, and said the greatest day of his life is when he went down the shaft of the gold mine and started working in a gold mine. And then my father, when he was about 20, started a bookstore. And in a couple of years it was 3 bookstores, and then he paid, it was the first one in the family to go to university.
Mm-hmm.
He studied at York University, did philosophy, and then went to Edinburgh to do a Master's of Letters, and that's where he met my mother. My mother was born in a small, also farming family in East Germany. She was born in 1944, just at the end of the war, towards the end of the war. They've had to flee Dresden right before it was bombed.
Mm-hmm.
And then they fled East Germany when she was 11 or 12 to West Germany. And so I think that narrative of kind of rural, peasant, agricultural, small village traditions and the kind of European cultural values and the impact of the war, even though my father was in Canada, has led me to this project in some way.
Mm-hmm.
I would say in many ways this project is very, very biographical.
I see.
Or autobiographical. It's been kind of a search for like, who am I, and and where is this? And so I remember going with my father the first time to Croatia, and going to these little villages, and they made a lamb, and we ate for 3 days together and talked, and they still cut hay kind of by hand and put it on these poles, and there was the level of, they got a fridge, I think, for the first time, not that long. It was very simple, like very
rural.
And it really impacted me, I think, in a very profound way. And
that close relationship with nature is one of the central themes of your album Resilience.
Yes,
actually. And of course the Eastern European Balkan musical roots through your exploration of the work of Bela Bartok.
Exactly.
So you did your doctoral thesis on Bartok?
Yes.
Could you maybe tell me about that?
Happily, it's interesting. Until my doctorate, I think I had most of the repertoire that I played was Baroque, classical, early Romantic. I basically had done very little contemporary music. I mean, contemporary meaning 20th century,
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Like, I really hadn't touched much. And I was, I would say the piece that I was very, solo Bach sonatas, partitas, and specifically the Chaconne was a piece that I was very, very, I kind of played everywhere and anywhere imaginable.
Mm-hmm.
And then I discovered this Bartok solo sonata, and I was like, I have to play this. I want to, and I've talked to many violinists, and they all tell me, I tried, failed. They're like, I stopped after 2 pages of the first movement, or I stopped. It's a very, I would say, you talk to many people, they will, what's the hardest piece written for violin? Like, and it's not even that it's virtuosically that hard. It's just that it's like everything blurs harmonically. It's very difficult, very difficult. It's difficult to listen to. It kind of, and it pushes the capacity or the boundary or the possibilities on the instrument basically to nearly impossible. Meaning, it's questionable whether the piece actually ever, works, in a sense, you could say, because it's not. But I really, I was like, I wanted that challenge, and I took it on. And part of in a doctorate, you do research, his analysis and historical research. And so we all know one of the first pieces I played, so it's not true, I played Romanian folk dances when I was a kid. It was probably one of the first. And that's very accessible and easy,
Sure.
And so we are all told, Bartok was one of the pioneers of what we used to be called ethnomusicology, or the collection of folk songs and folk melodies, and that he collected these with Kordai, and that helped inform his language. And that's what most of us know. And so I assumed, there's a couple hundred pages maybe of manuscript somewhere. There's some folk songs that are collected, and maybe something was done with that or not, but I kind of, when I started really taking this seriously and researching, I realized that it's much bigger than that, and I think not all of the people that I know are really aware of that. Colleagues, teachers. I was very much supported in this by my teachers at Stony Brook, the Emerson String Quartet, Philip Setzer and Eugene Drucker, who really became known through their recording of the Bartok. They were the first quartet to record and to perform all the 6 Bartok quartets in one cycle, kind of. They really, that was how they kind of emerged.
I see.
That they won their first Grammy for that.
Okay.
And so I had this talk with Phil, and he said, you should really pursue this. And so I went to Columbia. A colleague of mine, she's also from Alberta, with Eastern European roots, Zosha Di Castri, Canadian composer, is professor. We went to McGill together. When I was at McGill, I recorded with the quartet here one of her first compositions as a composer. She was a pianist before. And I talked to her, and she's like, "Yeah, I'll put you in touch with, the head librarian who's in charge of the archive collection," because I had, through research, found out that most of the manuscripts, or many of the manuscripts of this folk music collection, were at Columbia, because that's where Bartok spent the last 5 years of his life. And so I made an appointment, went. Jennifer Lee, she's just retired now. I just received an email from her today, actually. But I went. She showed me into this room, and there were like boxes and boxes of manuscripts, original manuscripts. These are notes here, and I'll just show them. So this is this.
We can take a picture of this.
Yeah, sure.
Yes,
this was digitized for the first time for my research. So part of the reason is that because of the copyright law in music, it's 70 or 75 years after the death of a composer, which in Bartok's case was 1945. Anything that hasn't been published remains not in the public domain. And I showed up there in fall of 2021, and we had a talk, and she said, well, it's as of 2020, this is now officially in the public domain.
Yeah.
So there's the quantity is actually staggering. And then there's also these tabulatures where he analyzes the syllables, the last note, the rhythmic range, the pitch range, the rhythmic structure of each one of these songs. So And in his letters to his son at the end of his life, Bartók said that he believed this to be probably the most important thing that he did in his life.
Mm-hmm.
This will have been his most important contribution,
Mm-hmm.
more than the pieces that he wrote, potentially.
Interesting.
That he, and I think through my research, the way I understand his intention is that you had at the same time that Bartók and Kodály started going into the countryside and recording Magyar and folk melodies in Hungary and in Romania, and you had in Vienna, you had Arnold Schoenberg developing the 12-tone system. Mm-hmm. They happened basically, at the same time. Yeah. And Schoenberg has been quoted to say, when there was this free tonality period, there was a period where he was searching, and then, that the 12-tone system will ensure the German supremacy of music for the next 100 years. That was these are his words, they're not mine. Mm-hmm. And so there was an attempt, I think, to keep to build the future of music, of atonal music, of abstract music, within the
German tradition in a way?
Yeah, within the German or Central European, the German Central European, exactly.
However, there are other elements. Central European, Austria-Hungary at the time was highly diverse.
Absolutely.
Empire, so Central Europe had a lot of other elements.
Well, yeah, and also, the Germanic tradition was very much in the kind of cerebral, analytical, theoretical,
framework.
You had the Freud and yes. The whole, it was
analytical,
yeah, and so and the result was something that worked beautifully theoretically and was mathematically, it works. The question is, does it really work musically? Does it really? And I mean, there are great pieces that were written in with this system, and I'm not at all.
Certainly.
But I think what Bartók was searching for was a door into what we now call atonal, music, but out of the tradition of musical heritage.
From the people.
From the people, from outside of Germanic, academic
circles, yeah.
And what he discovered, and really by mistake, is that many of these folk melodies are polymodal, meaning they have major and minor exist within the same, within the same measure, within the same phrase. That there is less of a clear tonic dominant relationship per se than because this music predates Bach, it predates Baroque, it predates the Renaissance. It's
in a way it's looking for the origins of perhaps Indo-European music,
exactly.
or if one can say that way.
Yeah. And so what's very interesting is then Bartók and Kodály's work, there was poets, and it was a whole Hungarian movement inspired a professor at Harvard by the name of Milman Parry. And Milman Parry was a professor of oral literature at Harvard, specifically classic, ancient Greek oral literature. And his question was, how did people remember? How did oral tradition get passed down? Meaning, how did the Iliad and the Odyssey, how did Homer's Iliad and Odyssey, how did people remember,
such a scope?
Yeah.
Literally, well, not literally, but the works, created works,
how did people remember and pass down word for word, verbatim, these stories, these poems? They're poetry. It's off rhyming couplets usually. There's a very strict form to it. And so he then went in 1930 to 1933, 2 major trips with Albert Lord, his assistant from Harvard, to what is former Serbia, Croatia,
exactly, the kingdom at the time.
Yeah. And to villages where people were still illiterate, meaning there was no reading or writing, or he specifically looked for the people that, and he asked them, do you know any, what are called these long heroic epic poems. Yeah. And so he recorded several 100,000 reels that are all stored in, they were on aluminum wax cylinder and then aluminum cylinder discs. And what he discovered is that these people no one recites these poems, they all sing them. It's all song, or 90% of it is song. And that melody and poetry, or melody and the word, have not yet separated. It's really in Bach's time, Gregorian chant, let's say, but where once you have melody being written down, that word and sound, become two separate entities in our consciousness. Yeah. But which
developed with the growth of literacy.
Yeah, of course.
So we can separate.
Yes, and we have a concept of a word that's independent of the sound of. So then in 1940, Columbia brought Bartók to America, and Bartók for 5 years, he was contract. He was semester by semester. It was kind of he died. It was awful. He died poor. He was sick. It was not. But he spent the last 5 years transcribing all of this recorded material, both some of his own that he had done, but principally it was all these field recordings that Milman Perry had recorded that brought back to Harvard. So there was a link. There was a kind of a
continuity.
Well, there was I guess the recordings are now at Harvard, but he came and lectured at Harvard, but he spent his day basically transcribing melody after melody, song, poem after poem of these recordings, and they have been sitting, collecting dust, so to speak. And so when it's interesting, my experience in farming, it's a whole other chapter, but I'll just say it was the experience. I became interested in kind of small scale sustainable agriculture, and one of the things that I was working on very close with a farm here just outside of Montreal. They were one of the first pioneer farms to do this CSA, community supported agriculture, fermier de famille. Okay. The Equiterre started with them, the organic baskets where people sign up at the beginning of the season and they get every week. Sure. And then they became the first farm to do a land trust, which the land has now been forever taken off the market. It's put into a trust. It can never be bought or sold again. So it will never be developed. It will never becomes like a national park or provincial park. Okay. And I was exploring with them using for a small scale vegetable operation, using draft power, meaning horse animals to pull like a plow or a cultivator. And I remember repairing, basically finding an old plow in the field, covered, rusted, whatever, grinding it, sanding it, with an electric grinder, repainting it, staining it, putting new wooden handles on, and hitching it up to the horse. And it's kind of like discovering these manuscripts for me was like kind of a similar experience. Like you find something old that's been like neglected or rejected, and and I would say it connected. I believe very much that what Bartók started has more, like he started something that is not yet completed in any that the language that he was exploring through this folk song material is kind of
exploited.
Yeah, I believe that is an important key to the future of music.
Okay.
Basically,
Okay.
I think that's what I just said in a very that.
Would you say, if I'm hearing
Yeah.
you, that somewhere you believe that there's perhaps more longevity to that
Absolutely.
approach than the more theoretical, perhaps?
I mean, it's always a combination. It's never one or the other. But I think today, so the other thing that happened in my doctorate is I took a seminar on timbre.
Mm-hmm.
And here at McGill, there's Stephen McAdams is very, timbre is the new frontier, or the final frontier, or the next frontier in music. And it really, this seminar, so we listened to everything from Renaissance, early Renaissance to Ligeti and then we would, on a paper, kind of draw what we heard, and then we would discuss it, we would present it. The question on the table was, can we develop a language for timbre, a formal compositional notation, the way we have for pitch on the step, for rhythm, and for harmony. So we have a language for the three primary elements, formal elements in music, and the question is, can we today develop a formal language for what is called timbre, or the quality of sound?
Mm-hmm.
And oral tradition is exactly that. Mm-hmm. Oral tradition is passed down through the experience of sound.
I see. Through the experience of timbre.
Through the experience of timbre.
Okay. Human, specifically human timbre.
Yeah, I mean, but instruments,
okay.
Instruments too. But well, it's mostly been the voice. But many of these are like there's a whole reel that's instrumental music. Let me see, instrumental here. So what I have here is only a very small part of it, but sorry. Here. So this is all instrumental melodies. You can knock yourself out, and this is
transcribed by Bartók.
Transcribed, yeah. And what's interesting, if you look at them very in detail, here I'm going to find one. There's the quarter tones, there's the kind of ornamentation. There's places where he writes out vibrato, kind of, and trills, and some of them are even arranged with other.
He's trying to emulate.
Yeah, he's trying to.
Temporal characteristics through
yes.
traditional music writing.
Yes, and so but that was really his question. I think that's my question. I guess is, if someone did this today, these melodies until then had never been written down by anyone. He's why did he choose 2/4? Why did he put it in this key? Why did he? You know what I mean?
That's true.
Like
That's
and I'm just looking here. I'm going.
He's chosen to formalize.
Yes.
Oral tradition in a way that perhaps the producers of that tradition may not have considered.
Yeah,